Thank you so much for joining on the Thought Leadership series. How are you doing?
I'm great, Julio. Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
No, thank you so much for sharing your time. So I'm not going to share very much about your professional experience because I would like you to share with us. It is going to be also in the podcast and in the LinkedIn article, all your bio, but I would like you to comment us a little bit of your professional experience.
Sure, happy to. So I guess my experience is a bit varied, sort of a non-linear path. I started my career in consulting and was fortunate to work for Deloitte in a number of different capacities, but I settled into the retail practice while working there, working with a lot of large retail brands, Kmart, Crate & Barrel, Abercrombie & Fitch, companies like that. And that was right about the time when retail brands were looking at establishing more of an online presence, where e-commerce was beginning to be a big thing in the dot-com boom in the early mid-90s. And one of the partners I worked with left and started a small consultancy here in Chicago. She invited me to join her, and I did, and was pretty quickly, within a few weeks, staffed at McDonald's to help design and launch the first McDonald's.com, which was a really fun experience. And I got to work with that brand in a consulting capacity for about a year and a half, and then had the opportunity to join full-time, which I did. And McDonald's is one of those companies that encourages you to move around. So I worked in communications, I worked in marketing, I worked in IT, I worked in finance, I worked in the restaurants for about 4 years, and ultimately settled into communications, where I spent about the last 9 or so years of my 17 years there, building an internal and external communication function for the US business. So I retired from McDonald's as Chief Communication Officer back in 2015, and went back into consulting, where I am now, with a company called CRA, really focused on leadership, research, and strategic communication. So kind of come full circle.
Yeah, I think that's a great path. Can you describe a little bit how is your normal day in Chicago? Like, how do you start, and what are the main tasks that you experience as a managing director at CRA?
Sure. I don't know that there's been such a thing as a normal day, especially over the last year and a half or so. But yeah, a lot of my day involves direct interaction with clients. I do a lot of coaching with senior leaders inside organizations. So I'll often have several coaching calls a day. Those agendas are really focused on whatever is on the mind of the individual coachee and potential topics that they're interested in, or challenges that they're facing. So it's a lot of conversation, always through the lens of relationships, really building and advancing those relationships with clients. We also do a fair amount of large-scale communication projects, whether that's leading through change, or leadership transitions, or big implementations. So really looking at communication schedules and strategies, and some of the orchestration involved with those. So it's a lot of interaction. It's very rare that I have time where I'm just reflecting by myself. So when I do get that time, I treasure it, but it's a lot of interaction.
Great, thank you for sharing all that. What are two kind of things that you like about having the experience that you have get in McDonald's and in the What are two things that these are the kind of the capstones of your career in terms of your daily work?
Sure. A couple things that I think have stood out at me across all of those experiences so far. One is the ability to work in a rapidly changing, diversified environment. So I'm really never working on the same thing for more than a few weeks or months at a time. The topics change, the dynamics change, the clients change, the projects change. So I really enjoy the ability to move from topic to topic and environment to environment. It keeps things fresh, and also allows me to get exposure to a lot of different people and organizations and industries, which I quite like. And I'd say the second would probably be an observation that, and this may sound obvious, but you can't do anything without other people. So the idea of being part of a team and curating a team and interfacing with colleagues, whether that's on the consulting side as a project team in the interest of a client, or if it's in partnership, shoulder to shoulder with a client, really being able to interact and be part of larger groups with multiple perspectives represented. So I think the diversity of experience and the highly collaborative aspect of it are two things that stand out to me.
Awesome. What do you think that if we should a little to your education background? I know that you didn't go to business schools, but can you tell us how did you switch in from other fields to these amazing marketing and advertising communications field?
Sure. So technically, I'm actually a scientist by training,
yeah,
or by education. It was a biology, chemistry major, and I loved sciences. And the things that drew me to science were really the idea of having a point of view and embarking on a rigorous approach to collect data and test assumptions and ideas, and then use that experience and those insights to form conclusions. But what I found through my experience, and I was fortunate to have a number of immersive internships where I was doing research, scientific research, hands-on. I loved the material, but I really struggled with the work environment. I was typically in a lab by myself, crunching numbers. There was not a lot of human interaction. It wasn't the most dynamic environment. So while it was intellectually challenging and stimulating, it was not interpersonally stimulating. And I knew, to be happy long term, I needed something a little bit more interactive and dynamic. Now, thankfully, having a liberal arts education, I was able to get some experience and exposure to all kinds of different disciplines in addition to science. And the reason I gravitated to consulting right out of college was that they didn't care what your major was. They wanted people that could think analytically and that could carry on a conversation with a potential client. And fortunately, I was able to do both of those things. So that's kind of how I transitioned.
And do you think that now would that apply to when some like a student from any other field wants to work in marketing or communications? Do you think that today is a key to have like a bachelor's or a degree in this field to go into this professional ladder? Or would your case would it still apply to these days?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think it certainly doesn't hurt, right? Having a degree in the field that you are pursuing is certainly an asset, but I certainly don't think it's a requirement. I think again, if there are so many different ways that if you think about what makes somebody successful in marketing or communications, it's the ability to understand a consumer or a customer point of view. It's to understand and know what kind of questions to ask. It's using data to make decisions. It's understanding trends. And I think all of those things you can potentially learn in other environments, right? Whether that's science or music or economics or whatever it is. So I think as long as some of those underlying kind of foundational ideas are considerations when, and they certainly are in most academic programs, then I think there can be a direct correlation. I hire a lot of people, and I'd say maybe only half of the people I hire have a degree in communications or marketing. The rest, I just hired somebody who has a degree in fine arts. She's a painter, but she also knows how to write. She also knows how to diagnose context. She knows how to ask good questions, and she's extremely relational. And with that foundation, you can do what we do.
Great. I think you mentioned great points about what you actually do in your daily days is like understanding the consumer, creating or asking good questions and leveraging data. So how would you, into more operational thing, how do you understand the consumer? What is your process to understand the consumer of any brand or in your previous positions? Because everybody talks about understanding the consumer, but many few people actually share their experience or their know-how and what professional tools do they use or what technology, what is their approach. So can you tell us and share your secrets about that, please?
Sure. And I don't know that I do it any better than anybody else, but when I think about understanding the consumer, a lot of it comes down to data. I know we mentioned a little bit about that, and there's certainly no shortage of data out there. Not all of it is good data. So I think being mindful of not only what kind of overarching trends are happening, but really understanding and digging deeper into patterns of behavior, and not just purchase intent or behavior around consumption, things like that, but just how are people living? Like what's important to them? What do they care about? Where do they spend their time? What do they prioritize? What frustrates them? And some of that, data exists pretty handily, and some of it you have to dig a little bit deeper. But I think kind of putting yourself in the consumer's shoes in terms of empathy and really understanding what matters to them, not just through the lens of a brand or a product, but more through a lens of just existing and living. That I think is really important. I think sometimes a trap that people fall into is it's almost too sterile of an analysis around consumer trends, and really it's about behavior and preference. I think are really the big motivators or the big definers of how people make decisions. So for me, I always try to look at the data, but then I also try to get in the consumer's head a little bit. And if we're talking about I work for McDonald's, obviously, right? I needed to be a McDonald's consumer before I could think about connecting with McDonald's consumers, right? So I worked in the restaurant for 4 years. I understood what that was like. I would go through the drive-through at least once a week and see what that experience was like. If I was on a road trip, I would stop at every McDonald's I could along the way, right? And just watch people and see what they were doing. So I think sometimes you can look at the data, and sometimes you just have to almost live the experience a little bit to make it even more personal.
And how often did you collect data from the consumers, or like how did you know that your consumer didn't change, or you were overseeing a new target, or how were you able to live up to the new trends of the market?
Yeah, I think it's constant. I don't think you can, just look at data annually or just look at, quarterly reports. I think it's a constant evolution. While the data may be produced at a particular frequency, some of the behavioral insights that you can gather are constant, right? How are people responding to media? How are people, responding to the economy? How are people embracing new technology? Like those things are changing daily, not annually. So I think it's just got to be a natural part of every consideration, is what is the absolute most current information we can find.
Right. As I mentioned, I would like to deep dive a little bit. Could you share with us 2 successes and 2 failures, so that we can have or create like a little case to analyze how a professional with 15 or more years of experience did some did some successes and failures, and what did you learn from their? What were the key drivers in these successes?
Sure. So a couple things I would point to in terms of successes, and I certainly wouldn't call these my successes. These were team successes. Lots of people involved in making these things happen. So certainly don't want to take credit for these, but I was fortunate to be involved in them. And two that came to mind, one internal communication and one was more in the bucket of external. On the internal side, when I was at McDonald's, and just to give you a frame of reference, at any given time in the US, McDonald's employs around 1.2 million people, if you include crew people in the restaurants. And an important nuance is those crew people are actually not employees of McDonald's, the company or the brand, but they are employees of McDonald's franchisees.
Yeah.
So about 95% of locations in the US are franchised. So they're McDonald's employees, but they're not actually McDonald's employees. So presented a really unique opportunity and challenge around how do we connect with those people that are essentially the frontline representative of the brand, but don't technically work for the brand or for the company.
And a quick parenthesis, if I may ask, so who recruits the employees, the headquarters or each franchisee?
Each franchisee.
Oh, that's...
Yes. So as you would imagine, a lot of complexity, a lot of differing opinions. So it's definitely a decentralized kind of a model. But one of the projects that we worked on there was, even though all of those different locations are different and the franchisees are different and the restaurants are different, what they share is the McDonald's brand, right? And there are some commonalities around that, around how we think about food quality, how we think about the environment, how we think about our communities. So we developed very early when app technology was just beginning. We were able to create essentially an app that allowed those 1.2 million crew people to subscribe and sign up on their own, not a requirement, but an optional thing for them, where they could get the latest information and have their questions answered about anything McDonald's related. So if we were launching a new chicken sandwich and they were serving the chicken sandwich, but they had questions around like, where does the chicken come from? Or why do we pick these toppings? Or what is the nutritional value? Or, any question. We created a platform and a forum for those crew people to connect in a way that they had never been able to connect before. And they had really, their whole experience was within that restaurant. So they had never really connected with their peers and colleagues, around the country and in other restaurants. So it was a great opportunity to create that connection. And what we found is not only did it help crew people feel more connected, but they also felt better about working at McDonald's. And as a result, were better able to represent the brand when working in their restaurant. So it was very, very difficult to do, but it was very important to do. And fortunately, that platform continues today and is even richer and more robust than it was, almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, my guess is that to implement that strategy would have been kind of difficult. But a question that perhaps is, how do you delimit the line between HR and internal communication? Because sometimes it's a difficult line and tends to blur in a way.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't know that you can very cleanly delineate it as much as acknowledge that the two need to coexist in a coordinated way. When I think about, and obviously we partnered very closely with our HR colleagues when working on this particular initiative, and they're looking through the lens of the employment experience, right? How people are recruited, how do they get trained and onboarded? Do they get paid on time? What do benefits look like? That kind of thing. From a communication side, we were thinking more around like, what do we need them to know about the brand? What information can we share with them about our products? How do we want them to interface with customers? How do they represent the brand ultimately to consumers? So two pieces of kind of the same pie, so to speak. So a lot of coordination required there. And even today, independent of that project, I work a ton with HR professionals in different client organizations because what we do overlaps to a degree, or can overlap to a degree.
Let's talk about something that you learned or you wanted to launch and maybe it didn't work the way you wanted.
Yeah, that always happens or can happen. Yeah. There was, I remember, this is another McDonald's story, but when I was working in operations, so I had just come out of the restaurants and was back at corporate. One of the ideas we had was to create almost like a concierge program for our restaurant managers, where they could call a single number and basically ask for any kind of service or need in the restaurant that would then be handled centrally on their behalf. So if they had a broken window that needed fixing, or if one of the toasters went out, or the computer in the back room went down, instead of having to figure out and resolve each of those individual issues themselves, we thought there could be benefit in having a central source that would handle those on their behalf, so that they could stay focused on their customers and being in the restaurants with their teams. So it sounded like a really good idea. We put a program together. We tested it. We launched it to a group of a few hundred restaurant managers, and they hated it. And the reason we were kind of surprised too. But the reason was, which is a really valid reason and a good learning, is we underestimated how much they valued their local relationships with the service providers that they were used to using. right? So if they had a broken window, they already knew who to call. And because they knew that person locally, he or she would be over, that day and would, board it up until the new glass was there. And, they had that connection. And when you funnel that through a central source, that central source doesn't have those local relationships, right? They don't know the people by name. They don't know them in their community. So response times were slower. Quality of service was less. The pricing wasn't as good. So all of these things, we thought we were doing the right thing by trying to save the manager's time. And what we found is, they could do it better locally. And that was a really important learning of striking the balance between consistency and continuity of like a large national brand, but then also the local nuance that's also really important in terms of those individual relationships.
Yeah, I think that is a great example of one thing that would sound amazing in theory, but then you are missing some points in the execution. And I think that is the way that you can still learn from that. Yeah, and to the same extent, what are good skills or things that master's students or a bachelor's student should have, like in terms of soft and hard skills? What are things that you would be looking for in person that are just finishing their programs?
Yeah, a couple things I always look for when I'm recruiting. One, and a couple of them are hard, and a couple of them are soft. I always look for a sense of natural curiosity. I want to work with people that ask really good questions, and not just expected questions, but really unexpected questions that demonstrate even deeper thinking about a particular issue. So, people that want to know why things work, or how things work, or why they work the way they do. Not just what the answer is, but like why is that the answer? Like yeah. There's an element to that. And I think it's a discipline that can be cultivated. I always say, when I'm hiring people, I want somebody that I can blindfold, put in a dark room, spin them around 40 times, and they're going to find their way out, right? Because they have good instincts. They know what kind of questions to ask. They know what clues to look for, and they're not afraid to take risk in that regard. So natural curiosity, I think, is really key. Another one I would point to is.
But before you go to the next one, why do you want them to ask them questions? Where would they use that is
yeah. I mean, life is questions. I feel like everything that we do, whether you're trying to understand a consumer mindset, or you're trying to decide what's the right platform to launch, or you're trying to decide how a product is going to land, like it all starts with asking good questions. What do people care about? Why do they care about that? Why do they care about that over this? Would they care about that if it was an option? Like it's not just the face value of the data that you have or the information, but it's what's underneath that that I think adds a level of richness and forces a level of analysis that maybe you wouldn't otherwise see. So I like people that you don't have to push that way. They're naturally curious enough where they're going to get there on their own.
All right. What else?
Another one I would say is a track record of excellence. And we're always looking for people that succeed, right? Or have shown that they can succeed. But I'm also looking for people that have a track record of excellence, not just getting good grades or not just getting the right internships, but are they excellent at home? Right? Are they excellent at whatever their chosen hobbies might be? Like what are they truly passionate about, and how have they created excellence in that regard, right? So if cooking is a hobby, then how do you get really, really good at cooking, right? If you like to run, do you know what your splits are in terms of your pacing, and how is that tracking over time, right? I look for people that aren't just going through the motions, but are actually have demonstrated and are looking to get really, really good at whatever it is, right? Not just the work stuff, but in all aspects of their lives. And what you often find is that people that care about excellence in all aspects of their life are more likely to be excellent in the work aspects of their life. It sounds simple, but there's a pattern there.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, which is fundamental to really every aspect of what we do, is a focus on relationships. So the ability to understand how relationships work, the ability to develop and nurture relationships over time. Again, not just like with a client if you're consulting, but with teams and colleagues and classmates over time. Like how do people's relationships naturally evolve, and have they demonstrated an ability to keep relationships alive regardless of context? Right? Do people still keep in touch with people from their childhood?
Right. And let's talk about a little. I'm very curious about, this interview will be released in the Pride Month, and you serve in the board of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago and as a founding member of the Governor's LGBT Advisory Council. And what does this volunteering jobs mean for you?
Yeah. So I came out in a work context in probably 1998 at McDonald's. I think I was the only one, wow. But it was important to me. And I didn't really have a lot of issues or particular challenge, but one thing I struggled with is I didn't have any points of reference in terms of are there other people like me, and if so, where are they, and what has their experience been, and so on. So pretty early on, I decided that I was going to make that a part of my external existence, but then also just a part of my priority in terms of whether it's creating space for people inside an organization. When I was at McDonald's, I chaired the LGBT employee network. I got involved with the AIDS Foundation, not because AIDS is an LGBT disease, but because it's disproportionately affecting the community in that way. So that was important to me, just in the community in general. And then, when the opportunity arose to help create the advisory council at the state level, that was also very intriguing to me, to be able to offer a perspective and share a life experience that, is my own, but could be helpful as others are thinking about, whether it's policy or, creating community, whatever it is. So I've always tried to make that a part, just because I didn't feel like when I was kind of coming up in the professional world, I didn't see other people like me. So I wanted to make sure that if there were others, that I would at least be a point of reference, or try to be a point of reference for people.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting topic, because as you mentioned, in the 90s, or even in the early 20s, in the early 2000s, it was kind of a difficult thing or situation to express as an individual. And in that extent, what are some spaces for LGBT professionals that you could outline or recommend, or that you have experienced or visited, that you want to share for other students or colleagues that are part of this community?
Yeah, and I'm probably not as current as I should be on all of those things. And to your point, I think a lot of things have changed. I would say, obviously any school, including Northwestern, is likely to have some affinity group or series of affinity groups for people that identify as LGBT. Most corporate organizations are also going to have some kind of, whether they call it a employee network or a business resource group. Organizations that do it really well tend to have very focused and specific and chartered organizations where employees of all dimensions of diversity can participate, not just as a place to go, but as a way to leverage their unique life experience and skills to benefit the business or the brand. That was always one of my big charges at McDonald's, is, it's not about creating a support group. It's about creating a group of people that can help us, sell more hamburgers. Like it's got to be through the lens of the business too. And most businesses have seen that and created spaces. So being on the lookout for those groups and organizations to either align with or participate in, I think is important. And then there are certainly some outside, based on geography. I know Chicago, here locally has a couple networking organizations for people that identify as LGBTQ. I will say the one thing that I've seen is, because now it's so pervasive and it is what it is. I think there are fewer, at least in my observation, there are fewer, niche groups, and it's more just about, everybody in, kind of participating and contributing in the same way. So.
Yeah. Finally, our last section, because the time flies so fast. Let's talk about your personal interests. What are your hobbies or your favorite books that the audience can, kind of relate to that, movies or trips that have shaped your personality, your excellence. Let's talk about what are the things that you like the most, or what makes you the happiest person in the world.
Well, for me, a lot of it comes down to energy management. What we do takes a lot of energy, and we all get our energy from different places. So for me, fitness is very important. I need to move in order to feel my best. So whether that's working out at the gym or running by the lake, those things are important to me year round. So I have to make time for that. So it also gives me a chance to, there's almost, for anybody that likes to run or runs long distances, there's something very meditative, or can be very meditative about running. And it is for me. So I get a couple benefits there.
How much time do you run?
Well, it depends. I mean, I've run the Chicago Marathon 5 times. But like for me, a good run is I like to get out for maybe 7 miles or so.
All right. That's a lot.
Goes by quickly. Again, if you just sort of meditate, it goes by quickly. So I love to do that. I have a passion for design. I did a design program in New York at Parsons, and I do kind of on the side some residential interior design work here in Chicago. So
yeah, check out your website. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, there's something creative about that. I mean, there's creative in what we do on the communication side, but there's also the visual arts are appealing to me. So I really appreciate that. I love to read, not just to consume information, but I love to dissect writing styles. So I'm always really interested in not just the content or the story, but how people write, and just observing those patterns of writing. So right now I read some funny stuff like David Sedaris, who he issued a 25 years worth of his journal entries as a book, which I just found fascinating because it's all written in that type of context, which is an interesting way to think about writing. Another book similar, again, around writing style, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And it's actually not written by Naval. It's written by another author who basically strung together tweets and interview transcripts with Naval. And it's a really interesting way to think about writing and biography in a very different way in the world of social media. So I like to consume those sorts of things where I can think about how people write.
And do you think this art passion or your readings, in some way, you can use it in your professional life, or have you ever experienced that they enhance your professional acumen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think running, you can learn a lot about stamina. Stamina is important in a professional context, right? Reading, I mean, just consuming how words are curated and how people think about vivid language and verb choice, how to create a feeling through words. I mean, we do that every day in communication. So if you pay attention to it, I think you can learn a lot of that that's directly applicable to what we do.
Right. Let's go to my final question. It's a ping pong session, and I will be just saying some words, and you can reply very quickly with just one word, one sentence, or a very few things. Right?
Okay.
Ready. Talent.
Talent is everything. You can't do anything without other people.
Crisis.
Crisis. Never wait. Waiting never helps in a crisis.
Brand.
Credible and authentic.
Leadership.
Behavior, how you show up.
Strategy.
Ambiguous.
Communications.
Central to life.
Work.
Fun.
Marketing.
Communications.
Passion.
Passion. Important.
A book or one book.
One book.
Yes.
Like ever.
One.
A prayer for Owen Meany.
Money.
Money. Nice to have, but not essential.
Power.
Power. Subjective.
What does Chicago mean for you?
Home.
LGBT.
Progress.
Education.
In the eye of the beholder.
And the last two. What is the best gift for you?
Time.
And the last one. The most beautiful thing in the world.
Stumped me. Most beautiful thing in the world? Relationships.
All right. All right. Ben, what would you like to share as a free topic or as a free piece of advice to close our interview?
The only other thing I would share, and we've touched on it a little bit, but truly relationships are central to everything that we do. And if you invest in relationships, with colleagues, with clients, with, family, with friends, I mean, that's where things happen. It's all through conversation and relationships. You can be really good at a technical skill. You can have a lot of expertise and you can know a lot of things. But if you don't know how to connect through relationships, you're never going to be effective in this field. So focusing deliberately on relationships and cultivating and nurturing them in a way that is authentic and true and productive is essential, key ingredient for success.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Medial IMC program and Thought Leadership series, we are so glad to have you and that you have shared all these experiences. And thank you as well to Neil that he made this interview possible, and our faculty advisor, the Professor Nancy Hover and Professor Bell. And I wish you have a good day.
Thank you. You as well. Take good care.